All right, let's get started. If there's people that pop in, I will do my best to watch on the side and make sure that they get into the waiting room. Thank you for spending a little bit of time with me on this. I was going to say Thursday, but it's only Wednesday, and we need every day that we can have to learn about how do we incorporate faith in the work environment here at Light Consulting. And maybe you can take some of these tidbits back to your employer and implement them on your own as well. So I am going to share my screen and then pop into the presentation. We use different platforms for different things, so I tend to forget where my buttons are. So not as smooth. There we get an email from Drew, even though this is what I had pulled up. Here, share. Actually, not share. I want to present. Okay, how do we incorporate our faith at Light Consulting? This is the team. This is the latest updated pictures, all smiling faces. Few people just had fresh babies that came for the picture, so that was great to do that. Poor old Bryce with the little male. We are working on what does it look like to have more men in our office. So we'll figure that out here. That's a 2025 challenge that we are going to accept. We are just a fun place to work. Disclaimer, we're going to talk about things that work for us and they may not work for you. So just being honest and transparent that some of the things that we give from an advice perspective are unique situation that work for us. So let's go ahead and jump in. So the first thing that we do at Light Consulting that is faith forward, that is really incorporating it, is we are bold in our core values in saying these are the things that we are trying to do. Now, if you have read anything by Patrick Lencioni, one of the things that he talks about when he talks about defining your core values is that some of them are pay to play values. So like when people say we are integrity or customer service or those type of things, those are a lot of pay to play values. Now we could say that maybe has shifted a little bit in the last 5 years, that excellent customer service isn't always given and or valued at an organization. But so ours are a little bit more distinct, and some of them are born in embedded values and some of them are aspirational, but they're all things that we are striving for, and some of them have various degrees. So love like Jesus is and always be an aspirational value. It is, we are human and we are selfish and we think about ourselves sometimes, a lot of times, and sometimes that makes it hard to love like Jesus, but we try to pull ourselves back to that on a regular basis. So if we have a difficult decision to make or a difficult conversation to enter into it, we try to slow down and think about, okay, how would Jesus handle this? He'd probably tell a story. So we speak in parables or give examples a lot of time when we're leading through situations. So it's a little bit of our love like Jesus. That intentional living, I would say we're pretty good at that. Some of us are more aspirational than others. Some of us are really good about setting boundaries and being intentional with our time and our resources. Give grace. We are really good at giving grace to others. We are less good at giving grace to ourselves because we have such a high standard of work here at Light Consulting that sometimes grace is a little bit difficult to give ourselves, but we're working on it. For sure, we're working on it. Help others. That's one that we vet out for in the hiring process, that if you are good at putting your others' needs in front of yours, that help others just kind of comes natural. And we have the ability to say, okay, we want to help out in this way, and we'll get a little bit into our give back into the community, but also from a team perspective. You'll never hear anybody say in this organization that that's not my job. Or if it does, then we correct it right away. Like, hey, everything is everybody's job. Or if you're putting up a boundary and being intentional with your time, let's maybe rephrase that and say, how can I create space for you to help, and what priorities need to shift to be able to do that? So we're able to do that. And then also bold in our faith, that trust that with Christ anything is possible. It did come out at our last quarterly that trust that with Bryce anything is possible. So that was just a funny thing. And now we tease about that, which is fairly true, because Bryce is very, one, he works with 13 other women and doesn't go crazy. So that just deserves a gold star in itself. But he's very emotionally intelligent for his age. He's very intelligent and then also emotionally intelligent. We don't often get that combination at somebody his age. So trust that with Bryce, anything is possible as well as Christ. So where do we get some resistance in this? I think being bold in our core values, and just saying that we're going to talk about Jesus, we're going to pray, we're going to do those things, is really helpful from both a client and an employee experience perspective. Because from an employee experience perspective, we talk about these core values in the interview process, and we have had people say, are those a deal breaker? And what the answer to that is, if you're not a Christian and practicing that on a daily basis, that's okay. Loving like Jesus does not mean that I'm going to tell you that you're a bad person and that you need to adopt all my things and all of that stuff. When we think about the life that Jesus led, he was meeting the woman at the well that he technically shouldn't even be talking to, right? From a societal rules. That's what loving like Jesus is meeting people where they're at. And so is that a deal breaker? No, by no means is it a deal breaker, but this is how we're going to interact. So if that's a rub for you in your experience, then you need to acknowledge it, because this isn't just you're trying to sell us. We're also want you to have a good experience in the organization. So if that's something that isn't in alignment for you, then you definitely you want to make that choice with that. And then from a client perspective, again, these things are out there and we share that. We most of our clients come through referrals, meaning like Bree is going to tell her friends about us and how great we are. And these things tend to just come out of conversation that if Bree was having a conversation with somebody who was totally against this, she might not recommend us, or she would be very forthcoming and saying that Sarah is a person who talks about God, who prays over us and does those things when it's necessary. And maybe that's not the right fit, and that's okay. So I think the beauty of being more upfront or faith forward is that it attracts those like-minded people. And if people are super unattracted to it, they just won't show up to it. So that's where in our core values and living these out on a daily basis is a piece of how we're incorporating our faith in the workplace. Now, here's 5 different areas in which we're doing it on a more of a logistical base. So we're going to go through what we do weekly, what our ad hoc meetings look like, what does giving back look like, our client relations, and then when we fall short, because we're going to fall short because we're human. So we can't do everything all of the time and get it right all of the time. So in the rhythm of the business that we experience at Light Consulting is we do 2 daily. So if you go to The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni, he gives you a blueprint. He also has a book that's dedicated just to this. It's called Death by Meeting, because he likes to write his titles in the negative to get us to go there. So he talks about the 4 different meeting types. One is the daily check-in, the other one is the weekly tactical, and then an ad hoc meeting for any subjects, and then your quarterly strategic meetings. So he talks about those 4 meetings. So how we put those into ours is in that regular meeting that I have right here, the devotional, and then that 2 times per week. Those are 2 of our meetings cadences that we have. So twice a week, We all hop on Teams for 15 minutes and we do what Lencioni would call as a daily check-in. And what we do there is somebody's in charge of the devotional, somebody's in charge of the prayer. So that's how we open it. And then on Mondays, we talk about our best from the weekend. And then what do we have in the next 3 days? So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, these are my top priorities, what my calendar looks like if I'm going to be working from home or if I'm going to be out of the office half a day. We want to create space for people to know those logistical things. And we go around the screen, if you will, and we each share that. So that happens on Mondays. On Thursdays, we do the same thing. Somebody does a devotional and they pray. And then rather than our wins, we talk about our stresses. What is stressing me out? One, for two reasons. One would be if you verbalize things, it loses its power over you. So if I'm carrying a stress and I haven't told anybody about that stress, then I'm stressed and they don't know why I'm stressed. And they're going to be like, geez, Sarah's crabby or whatever it is, but they're maybe going to internalize that and think, hey, I must have did something wrong, when the real thing is that I'm dealing with something that I didn't verbalize. So that's why we ask on Thursday that you do the stressors, is so that you can lose its power. And then going into the weekend, if we can do anything in those final 2 days of the work week to make your weekend better, we are going to help and come alongside you in that. Because our most important thing here on earth is the relationships that we have with people, which includes the people we have at home. So the only way you're going to have a good Sunday is if you had a good Thursday, Friday, and those things. You don't carry heavy into the weekend and then into your Monday. So those are the reasons that we use those statements on those daily check-ins. In our regular weekly meetings, we also do devotionals in there. So we're pulling it in those different ways. Now, we also utilize Snapchat. So for my business partner, Melissa's on the Dale Carnegie side, for her birthday, I challenged myself to communicate happy birthday to in all platforms that we communicate. There were 12 of them. There were 12 platforms in which we interact on a daily basis. Snapchat's one of them. You got Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, email, phone, text, Voxer. I can't even remember all of them, but I just went down the list and like checked them off and said, okay, I'm saying happy birthday to you in person. That's another way we communicate on a regular basis. So it was kind of fun. But there's this group of us who went through this leadership journey called Discover Leadership's Master Grad Program. And we do this in the Dale Carnegie as well. So Jenna did the Dale Carnegie in July. Bree, you've been through Dale Carnegie as well. Yeah. So in that Dale Carnegie, in this other leadership program, we use I am statements. So I am is actually from the Bible. And that's where we, whether Dale Carnegie knew that that's what he was doing, or the person who wrote the curriculum for Discover Leadership knew what he was doing when they decided to have I am statements. Not sure, but we use those. So I have 5 my I am statements. Drew and Carrie and Melissa, they switch theirs up a little bit. I need consistency in my life because I am a fast mover who flies by the seat of my pants a lot of times. So in my I ams, I'm consistent. So I am calm, I am confident, I am personally responsible, I am trusting, and I am committed. And those are the 5 things I need to focus on. When I focus on those things, then life just goes a little bit better. So those are the 3 weekly and kind of daily things that we do at Light Consulting to lead with our faith. Then in ad hoc meetings. So what I think is interesting about leading an organization or leading a team is we kind of have these feelings. I like to refer to that as the Holy Spirit, but whether you call it intuition or the Holy Spirit, you have these gut check moments where you're like, there's a tension here, right? There's something going on here, and maybe I may be interpreting it this way. I don't know. I haven't had the conversation yet with the team member to interpret it the other way. And what we like to do, or what I like to do, is say, okay, let's stop and think about what is going on here and acknowledge that. So when I talk about wins and stressors here, so ad hoc meetings that we've had is we have just in August we had 3 people out on maternity leave. One was covering maternity leave, and 2 people actually had babies. And we were a team, and then we were an employee down because one left in July. So we were a team of 14 that was now had 10 people doing 14 people's work, basically. So it was a little heavy in August, and I could feel that. I could feel that in what I was experiencing from clients, but I could also feel it just in the energy in the space. So we put a lunch on the calendar and said, we're just going to take some time to talk about what's stressing us out right now. So we went around the room, and whether it was personal or professional, because guess what? You don't actually get to walk through those doors, and all the stuff that you have personally just stays outside. That's not how that works. So for a lot of people, it was personal that is just heavy on top of the workload that's going on in the organization. And so we wrote all those down, and then we just prayed over it. And the response that came out of that, and I don't do these things for the response. I do them to help move people through things. But the response we got out of that was pretty incredible to like, now we're not as stressed for the residual effect definitely lasted for a couple weeks. We're going to be together tomorrow and Friday, so we get to do this again and pray over people. But acknowledging that fear and that stress, like again, our words have power. If we look in scripture, and it says often about the power of the tongue, and what's letting the go of those things is really helpful. Like let go and let God, and giving it to God and really giving it to him. If we're holding that in and not expressing it, that's a really difficult thing to do. And then the address 365 times, what that is I've been doing some research on how the Bible speaks to mental health, and it says fear not in the Bible 365 times. There's one other, I think there's one other phrase that they said, oh, maybe it's 366. I'm not sure. I didn't like go and through all 1,500 pages and highlight them. But I, used my resources and asked technology to tell me how many times. But when we think about stress and where stress comes from, it often comes from a fear and anxiety. And if we can reduce that fear, if we can let go and let God, then we really can move through things at a more comforting pace. It doesn't mean that the pain goes away, it's just less painful. The second thing that we do, or maybe I'm on the third thing that we do, is give back. So we're very intentional about our giving back, whether it's the help others that it's coming into it, intentional living, being intentional with our time, talent, and treasure. So we are trying to be God honoring in our practice. So we give time. These are just a few organizations that we dedicate time to, both inside the workday and outside the workday. So just last week, I think the team, or a handful of people from the team, went to Hope Blooms and arranged flowers so that people who Hope Blooms serves had those flowers to brighten their day. We've served meals at the Salvation Army. I don't know that for those of you who know this story, which I think is just Drew. I don't know that Bryce has been back there since he got hit on at the Salvation Army lunch line. So I'm gonna have to tease him about that. And it's okay, Bryce. Like it's okay. And then Giving Hearts Day, we celebrate Giving Hearts Day as a holiday. So if you're in the Fargo-Moorhead community, Giving Hearts Day is a big deal for our nonprofits, and we run around, give away money, and we run around volunteering, and it is quite the team builder in that piece as well. So really giving back our time. And then our talents. So we sit on boards. These are just a couple. Drew is the president of the Gigi's Playhouse Board. I'm currently the chair of the Park Christian School Board. I'm also pressure prompted, so I did this last night. So if I really thought about it, I think we could put a few more boards or committees and ways that we help and use our talent to give back to the community. I know, but we have two people who are yoga instructors because that's where their passion is, and giving that talent of being able to move your body in a certain way and sharing that with the world is a piece of giving back. And then we encourage that. So we're not like, you can only do yoga or instruct yoga before 8 a.m. or after 5 p.m. Like if you're teaching a noon class, great. If you have a 4:30 class, great. We just really are welcoming to using our gifts to share with one another. And as long as we're getting the work done, we don't need to make it a big deal about the other things. And then when it comes to our treasury, this is something that was a bold action by our leadership team, is to commit 10% of top line. So in biblical reference, they talk about this, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of your produce. So when people who are in finance are like, ooh, that's a lot. I'm like, yes, as I'm like talking to people like, well, we may not be able to hire you because we have to give away all this money because God said so. I'm just kidding. That's not how it goes. It goes in we have committed to giving the first 10% of our organization to kingdom building work. So that could be a variety of things. Bio Girls is the one that we support, philanthropy. Faith Forward is one that we support in that way financially as well. So why I have the P&L on here is to show we're actually $3,000 off as of August 30th. So we'll true that up here at the end of the year. If you take that 1,120,000 that we've billed so far this year and times 10% would be 112, not 109. So we're 3,000 behind, but we'll catch up. Don't worry about that. But this is a big thing, and why this is important to our work team to see this behavior exhibited is because our business is financial consulting, and accounting services. So the concept of giving away 10% of my hard-earned money, if you will, if we're interacting with entrepreneurs and business owners, is a hard concept to grasp. Now, the beauty of it is when we're really obeying what we're supposed to do here on earth, we can't take our money with us. We shouldn't be worshiping our money. We should be coming up with strategies in which we can do this. Now, our business model as a professional services business allows for tolerance here. Now, if I was a general contractor, we work a lot in construction and real estate. They don't have enough margin in their projects to be able to give away 10% of their top line because they actually probably only drop anywhere from 3 to 8% of their top line to their bottom line. So if they gave away 10% of their top line, they would actually be negative. So I would never encourage a general contractor based on their business model to do that. Now, I might use a different number for them. I might use their gross profit or their bottom line, what's returned to the owners, as a number for them to do that calculation. So I don't want anybody to take this and be like, oh yeah, I'll just do that. It depends on the industry that you're in. It depends on whether or not your business that you're running will even tolerate that, because there are lots that 10% would not work. All right, then when it comes to our client relations, how we incorporate our faith is one we talk about it a decent amount, and the most fun thing is we celebrate our clients, our team, in the good times, in the bad. So we have Renee here who passed her pilot's license, and Catherine who turned 40, and then we also have a picture of a grief box, because one of the things that we find just what is making business and life light is coming alongside people in the heaviness of things. So when people have lost loved ones or battling cancer and those type of things, we have Betsy usually is the one who gets tasked with being the joy bringer. We'll send flowers, we'll send one of these grief boxes, we'll send something letting them know that we're thinking of them. And we trust the Holy Spirit will prompt us with the right people showing, whether it's showing up in our social, and because it's not just our clients. Like these are people just in the community that we interact with, that in some cases they 3 years later become our clients, or they never do, and they just are. We just want to be there for people in the good times and the bad. And something that I saw the other day that really kind of hit me is Simon Sinek was talking about, when you're struggling, it's really easy to reach out to people and say, hey, I need help with this, I need help with that. Sometimes when we're really excelling or we're doing really great things, it's also hard. Okay, so if it's hard for me to say, hey, can you help me out with this? I'm struggling with this. Jenna and Drew know that I don't overly struggle with that. I invite people into my pain quite frequently. I mean, it's just more fun if we can all cry together. But the thing that Simon said, and sorry, I have a tickle in my throat, but the other thing that Simon said that was really convicting is, so if you have 8 or so people that you could text in those hard times, how many people would you text in those good times? Like, I just won an award, or we're celebrating X. And this was interesting to me personally, because when I went through 35 under 35, which is a program we have here in Fargo, and 2011 is the year I went through it. So 13 years ago, at the last session, Tammy Miller, who was the CEO of Border States at the time, currently the Lieutenant Governor of North Dakota, I put up my hand and I said, I want to be the CFO of a Fortune 500 company. So this was young Sarah that said this, and I now know different and have chosen different. But I said that, and then I started executing on that plan. And that included getting my MBA, that included working and acquiring a whole bunch of knowledge that's now of value to me. But when the announcement was made to be promoted to the CFO of an organization here in town, nobody was celebrating that. And it was just interesting. So I text my sister and I said, so the announcement went out today. I have this bottle of wine. Can I come over and you drink it with me? You and Joel celebrate with me. And that was like the first time that I kind of felt like I have accomplished something that I had set out to, but who do I feel close enough to where they're not? I wasn't doing that to brag. I wasn't doing that to do anything besides to feel like, hey, I worked my tail off and I got this, and I want somebody to celebrate with that. So that was really interesting to do that. And that brings me to that second point of showing up. So one thing that we really stress about is we can sit in our cubicles or little spaces here at Light Consulting and get work done and hammer out a bunch of things. But if we're missing so we have a real focus on education here. So we have people going through 35 under 35, the Chamber Leadership Program, the Dale Carnegie's, all of these education things. We're not going to miss a graduation. Like maybe it's not me there, but it's got to be somebody there. We got to show up for those really big moments, just because we're just grown-up kids. So if you have children, or if you just love little people, or if you just hang out on Instagram Reels, you'll see how incredibly excited little people are when their people are there. And that, like, if you want something to melt your heart, that's what it is. Now, at some point in growing up, we decide that it's not that important anymore. It's still super important to show up for people in their celebratory things and in their hard times. So that's just a real hard focus, or a real intentional focus here at Light Consulting, and we pray with people. So when it's good, usually when it's bad. So we have, this is a self-reflection checkpoint. Drew's going to write this down, is we need to praise when it's good, because there's a lot of good going on here versus just inviting God to help us when it's bad. So that's something that we need to do better, is not just pray for tough times, but we need to praise in those good times as well. But we pray together, we pray with our clients. Even my clients who, nobody's like, no, you cannot pray for me. But they're not, I know they're not there. And I'm like, I'll just say a quick one for you and it'll be fine. It's kind of funny, actually. I think it's funny. They probably don't. The other thing that we do is, so that when things go wrong, which guess what? We're human and we make mistakes. One thing that we are intentional about too is taking ownership and addressing things right away. So, and I haven't studied this specific topic to try to understand what does the Bible say about addressing things immediately, and then addressing them, like what you should say and shouldn't say, and or if anything. So I need to spend a little bit of time in there. I do know a little bit about Matthew 18 and addressing people that you have a problem with. Like, I'm not going to go talk to Jenna about Drew. If I have a problem with Drew, I go talk to Drew. Like, let's just practice that. So extreme ownership in the relationship, and try not to create drama. When actually Bryce, who's a team member here, one of his prior employers is engaged with us, so he got to go back there, and he's like, it was kind of fun to go back and realize all the corporate drama that still exists out there. We don't have a lot of drama here because we do this. We nip things in the butt right away. So if you have an uneasy feeling, or you don't know what you're doing, or like something you said kind of made me think twice about something, we just address it right away. We don't want, when it has love your neighbor as yourself, that Matthew 22:39 there, what that means is, if I don't want Jenna to talk to Drew about me, then I better not talk to Jenna about Drew. Like, we have to practice what we preach, and we want to be able to do those things. Taking extreme ownership, sometimes too much. I would say it hasn't nipped me in the butt. I have admitted it actually probably looked bad on the other person more than it did on me. So one of the things, when we have commercial, I'm going to tell you a little story here. So we have commercial real estate that we manage, which includes this fun process annually called CAM reconciliation. So CAM is common area maintenance, meaning like the snow removal, the janitorial, property taxes, insurance. We go through this process of saying, okay, we thought it was going to be 20,000. It actually was 30,000, and you owe us 10,000. It's super fun for no one. And the process itself, it takes time, and we want to gather all the information and provide it. And the team does it now, but for years I was the communicator of bad news, because I didn't want anybody else to have that burden of being the bad news bears person. And in the one instance, and we've been doing this since 2020, if not 2019. So in 2020, if you guys remember what was going on there, is business was a little tough for a lot of people, specifically some retail stores and gyms, and some of those places that couldn't be open for a period of time. So what ended up happening is, I really just love a lot of people, and one of my cardinal sins is I love to be loved, and I love to have people like me, and then creates issues sometimes, because then I don't always confront things. So it's something that I am actively working on, is this extreme ownership. So now we can fast forward to, okay, now we've gone a few years where you haven't paid your CAM overage, and the ownership is getting kind of mad that you're not doing this. So when I say this has nipped me in the bud, it really hasn't. So in this, I always gave him his information and always sent it to him, but I wasn't on on him all the time, like, you have to pay this bill. Just because you're not paying it doesn't mean it goes away. It still shows up on your report that you owe us this money. But I wasn't like going after him, and I apologized for that. So then when the ownership group was putting pressure on me to collect from him, that's one of the things that I admitted to, is that I apologize that my style is not one of micromanaging and not one of pushing on you over and over again. And if you thought that that was a way that I was communicating that you didn't have to pay, I apologize for that. And when the attorneys got involved, he actually ended up putting that into the letter to the ownership, that because of my lack of leadership, that he was unaware of these things. Don't worry, the ownership didn't take that less than, this is a person who doesn't want to pay their bill, and that are using that information to do that. But I was transparent and owned that my style is not going to be like, hey, on your tail about these things. And I can feel good about saying that because it's the truth. I didn't bother him every month for that, sent the bill, explained that it's still due. And yeah, so that's just one example of that. So then grace. So things go wrong, both whether we made the mistake or somebody's made the mistake, that we're pulling through, is really extending that grace to people, and to ourselves is probably the hardest thing. Is like, we're gonna mess up, people are going to mess up, and that doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means whether it was a bad actual choice or a mistake or whatever that looks like, that's okay. We just really need to extend grace to people, and that is pretty cool. It's pretty cool to be able to do that, and pretty cool to be able to receive grace. And what we find is, because we perform pretty consistently at a high level, it's much easier for our clients to give grace, or even to tell them. A situation that we ran into just recently is, one of our clients had to do some layoffs, and in the conversation of the layoff, and we handle their payroll, one of the people said, well, their skill set kind of fits into Light. So the one of the employees who was having the conversation with us, like, well, maybe you'd be a good fit at Light. And the comment was, well, I wouldn't work there because they shared payroll information or whatever. So it gets back to us like 3 conversations later. And so we address it right away. So this is why we have no dramas, because I'm going to nip it in the butt. So whether you want me to do a group call with all these people who are involved or not, or how do you want me to handle this? And turns out that it wasn't us. It was somebody on the internal team that was sharing this information, not us. And rather than saying, okay, we're going to drag them through the mud and expose that they were doing this, we just said, it's, what's done is done, and they're going through a tough time right now. We're not going to add any fuel to the fire. We're just going to let it go. Because we, in that case, there's a little bit of our reputation that someone out there thinks this, and we would love to correct that, but it's also not going to do any good for that person to be corrected and to be exposed in the pain that they're going through, or wherever they shifted that blame and responsibility there. So we just are given grace in that, and we're just going to let that go. And because we need grace a lot of times too. There's a lot of times when we do mess up, and we need grace as well. Like, hey, just because I didn't tell you owed the CAM every month for the last 3 years doesn't mean it went away. So I needed that grace, and I took it, and it worked out okay. So grace is super important to living that way. I would say not the biggest, this isn't the biggest, but those are all things that we do internally in basically an accounting firm. That's what we do on a daily basis. Now, what we do outside of the accounting firm is we also do all Sarah's crazy ideas, which one of them was, let's spend a bunch of money. No, just kidding. Let's bring people together and talk about how do we do this in a not go to jail yet also welcoming environment. So a lot of times when people are like, oh, I could never do that. I could never say I love you at work. I could never talk about Jesus or God at work. My challenge to you is why do you think that? And usually it's like, well, HR wouldn't allow it. Well, if you actually, I'm actually SPHR, Senior Professional Human Resources, which means I could pass a test. So there's no law that says that you can't talk about it. What it says is you can't discriminate based on these categories, and one of them is religion. I'm not discriminating against religion. I'm sharing mine, and I'm also forward in the interview process or in the client process about what we believe and why we, whether it's why we believe what we believe, but that we believe those things. So we're not forcing you to be an employee here, and we're not forcing you to be a client of ours. So it really is this beautiful marriage of, if that's something you value, or even if it's don't, but you like the fruit that comes from it, that's great. Let's experience each other in that. And if not, that's okay. So Faith Forward is a Christian business conference that is like in 40 some days. I cannot believe that it's that close to go from a vision to we are 40 some days away from having Faith Forward in Fargo. What this is really, when I coach executive level people, this fear, there's fear in almost all of the things that are holding them back. So how we move through fear is action, and we have to have faith that all things are going to work out for our good to be able to make some of the really difficult decisions that we have as leaders. So the intent behind Faith Forward is to learn and inspire people to create community around those who want to be a little bit more faith forward, and then equip them with tools so that they can do that. So when when HR says, I can't say I love you, you can say, there's nowhere that says that I can't do that. So just equipping people with that. We're bringing Dr. Henry Cloud to Fargo. He's going to talk about trust, which if you guys run any organization or just actually you're in a relationship with somebody, you know how important trust is. And then we have like 10 to 12 local speakers who are in businesses, in faith communities, all throughout our community that are just leading in this way, and they're going to give you some tips and tricks on how to do it. So it's just going to be a really powerful 2 days at Hope South in November. And that's all I have for you guys. I knew this was going to be a little shorter than an hour. What questions do you have for me? Or who has the first question?
Yes, I have a question for you, Sarah. So you said that you're very straightforward in like the interview process or when you're taking on a new client. Have you ever found that someone will upfront say like, yep, that all sounds great, and then when they're kind of immersed in it, they're not as willing?
No, I haven't ran into it. Usually it vets itself out in the interview process. We have had somebody say, is that a deal breaker? And then we just explain like, how do we live this out on a daily basis? And if that's a deal breaker for you, by all means, then it's a deal breaker, but it's not for us that I mean, if we ask you to do the devotion, we expect you to do it because we participate from a team perspective, but we haven't had somebody try to pull the wool over our eyes yet. I would say there's some of our clients who were like, I don't know about this behavior, but we work through that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes. Next question. Christy, do you have any questions or thoughts?
No, I don't. It's kind of, it's just different. I'm, in a big corporation, and that's just not discussed.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice to hear that there's something like that out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and thank you for joining. I haven't read it yet. It's on my bookshelf. It's called The Transformation Factor. And I grabbed it at the airport because I was you know, with this faith forward thing, and I get that push from people like saying we can't. That's Coca-Cola bottling company that has 16,000 employees that is faith forward, or Chick-fil-A, right, is faith forward, those type of things. So there are big businesses that can operate that way. I think that the tough part is to go from not to doing that, because then that massive shift, like we can't say, oh, 16,000 people, we are now going to pray in all of these settings and you're going to not be offended by it, even though upfront we've never done that before. Like that's a really tough transition, and totally get that. And I would say in the larger we get in organizations, and even here we feel a little bit of that growing pain, is the flexibility and the freedom becomes a little bit less. And it's not a matter of that we can't, it's a matter of how do we make sure that the intent is transformed all the way down, because you're less removed, or you're more removed from the actual message that's going out. It's why I encourage larger organizations to communicate via video, or doing town hall meetings and those type of things. So Bell Bank, one of the larger organizations in our community, they do, I don't know how frequently, but they do town halls where people come in and Mike Solberg is sharing, he prays, he does those things. But if you're hearing it secondhand, it's just the message doesn't always hit. So that's why it's a little bit harder in our larger organizations to live out that way. Awesome. 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 Anything else for you guys today? No? Okay. Well, thank you for spending some time with me today. I really appreciate the 48 minutes of your life, and encourage you to, even if it's just the little things, even if it's just being there when somebody's having a tough day, like that's incorporating faith in your workplace. And it doesn't have to be as big, as bold as praying over everybody. It can be as small as just praying in your space for somebody that you want, or it can be just bringing them a cup of coffee. It can be as little as that. So thank you for your time today. I hope you guys all have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thanks,
Thank
Sarah.
you.
Yeah. Bye.